Hello, welcome back. Already in the previous videos, we have already discussed about ER modeling or ER model, ER diagram, then attributes, relationships, and all. Okay, so today we're going to see uh, the steps in order to design a ER, diagram itself. So having said this, let us revisit some few concepts again. So we know what is an ER modeling, a graphical, representation for understanding and organizing data independent of actual, data implementation. So what it is nothing but it is a technique through which we are a graphical technique through which we are trying to represent the actual data implementation and all. Okay, so here's a couple of things that we have already discussed is like entity. What is an entity? It's something which has an independent existence. Okay, some things, it may be a physical thing, it may be a conceptual thing, like physical thing, it may be like customers, banks and all. Conceptual thing like transaction and all. Okay, also it is known as the entity type, right? An entity instance is nothing but a particular member of the entity. Okay, say for example an entity type of is students, then Rakesh, for the name of the student, suppose Rakesh, he becomes a nothing but a particular instant of that particular of that entity itself. Okay, so now attributes, one of the attributes is not is the properties or the characteristic that helps us in order to describe the entities. So when you talk about an entity called a student, we are talking about the Rakesh as a part of entity instant. So let if Rakesh is the name, right? So name becomes an entity, right? If for example the branch, the registration numbers and all these things becomes the attributes itself of the entity. Okay, yes. So relationship is nothing but the associations between the entities. Okay, we have seen the relationships in terms of degree and cardinality, right? And also aptitude, different type of attribute you have seen. Okay, simple attribute, the composite attribute, then we have seen a single value attribute, multi-value attribute, okay, derived attribute, yes, right? So that way, we have seen this. Now the thing is, we have understood, right, what as entity means, what an entity instance means, what are attributes like key attributes and all these things, and the relationship, associations between the entities also. Now in order to design this particular ERI, we need to identify these entities, these attributes, the relationships, and all these things, right? So when a problem is given to you, you need to go through this problem, okay? Or maybe in a business scenario when you will be working in an industry itself, so you may move to the client, okay? You will be talking with the client, then you have to understand the requirement of the client, okay? So or he may try to give you the requirement itself, okay, and then you need to go through that requirement and then you need to understand it. So having said this, in order to first steps whenever you move into ER modeling, you need to identify the entities. Okay, that is important. So how are you going to identify the entity? As we have talked about it, entity is nothing but some kind of physical thing or some kind of concept who has an independent existence. When I say independent existence, when you talk about customer in my organization, if the customer leave, but still customer exists, right? So that's what is called as an independent existence. So we need to find out whenever the requirement is given to you, you need to identify the entities, and the best part is to search for a noun. Okay, so if you search for a noun, you're going to understand exactly, okay, these are the potential entities itself. So you try to write it down, the entities, okay, yes, and then slowly and slowly when you move down and in order to identify the attributes and relations, you will understand what are the entities which who are can be represented the entities, okay, which and what are the different attributes which will come down. Okay, so you understand these are the entities I have. So first and foremost, tell whenever you are doing an ER modeling is nothing but to identify the entities, okay, then find the relationships. Once you identify the the entities, then you have to go for the relationship. Say for example, I'm talking about I'm talking about this general scenario of a organization, right? The education organization. So you understand, identify students and teachers, then you understand the relationship, like teacher teaches the students, right? Okay, so now we have this particular the relationship between the student. So try to find out the relationships, right? And then identify the attributes of the entity. And once you identify the identify the key attributes. The key attributes or the key attribute or attributes, maybe one, or maybe a composite, as well, a composite key attribute also, right, which you have discussed. So try to identify, because this is very important in modeling, because this only will uniquely identify each of this instance of the entity itself. So identify the key entity is very much. So once you identify the entities, once you identify the relationships, or once you identify the attributes, then you go for identify the key attributes, right? Key attributes you identified. Okay. So having said this, we move into that, identify the other relevant attributes, right? Okay. So I was telling that you can find the relevant, find the relevant attributes, then find the key attributes also. Or in the uh, flip side, something like that, you can find out that what could be the key attributes, right? So which one will uniquely identify the entity itself. Try to look out for that. Once you are go through it, then you get the other relevant attributes itself. Or you can firstly you can see that these are my attributes. Okay, these are my relevant attributes of that entity, and then I look after for my key attributes itself. Okay, so now once you identify the entities, okay, these are my entities. Once you identify the relationship, right, I was talking about the student and teacher are the two entities that identify the relationships. Okay, teacher teaches student, so you find out the relationship, right? And then you identify the key attributes, attributes of the student. Key attribute to the student ID. Then key attribute of the faculty is the faculty ID, right? So once you are able to identify the entities, once you're able to identify the relation, you're going for finding out the key attributes, right? So which one of the attribute we will going to uniquely identify the entity. For example, the student, we are talking about the student ID. For the teachers, it will be teacher ID, or it may be an employee ID of the teacher itself. So that's the key attribute. Then other relevant attributes of the students, like what is the name of the student, right? What is his phone number, his email ID, his brands, his parents' names, like that. For the teacher also will have the teacher's, name, what is his qualification, right? What is his salary? So all these things will be done. Now, once you have the entities, once you have the relationships, once you have the key attribute or other attribute, now just take us all this part and complete the, ER diagram. Say, for example, I identified three entities, okay? Student, course, and teachers. Okay, so let me understand the relation between, okay, teacher teaches the students, we got it. Okay, one teacher, if I say is having it can teach many students, and many students will be associated with one student may associate with many teachers, so you have a ms to an relationship that we have find out. And student and course is like that, one student will going to have go can have multiple course, and one course can have multiple students, so you have a relationship ms to, and you find it out. Teacher and course, if you say strictly that one course will be only by the one teacher, then we have to have one is to n type of relationship. So you identify, then we have identified the key attributes and the other attributes. And just now, after that, you just start drawing the ER diagram and complete, including all the attributes and the primary key, right? So having said this, so in ER modeling, for steps in designing the ER diagram itself is like, first you need to identify the entities. Okay, just try to look out for the noun words. Okay, and then find out which are the prominent, what to say, the physical or the conceptual thing that was talking about, which can be the entities. You need to find it out. Then you need to identify the relationship between these entities, okay, the key attributes, the other relevant attributes, and then ER diagram. Having said that, the steps are easy, but it requires a little bit of experience. So when you start, drawing the EI diagram for one or two, some kind of problems, it will be a little bit of difficult, but slowly and slowly you will understand, and then it will become a very easy for you in order to design a ER diagram. Okay. So having said this, so let me revisit again. The steps is right. Identify the entities, the finding the relationship, identify the key attributes of every entity, then identify the other relevant attributes. Once it is done, then complete the ER diagram with all the attributes, including the primary key. Okay, so thank you. I hope you have understood the steps in design the ER model, because in the next session I will be taking one or two case studies and will try to follow each of the steps in order to draw the ER diagram. Okay, so thank you. Keep watching my video, keep liking my video, share my videos, and do subscribe my video. Thank you so much.